Welcome to Empowerment Time, our weekly program brought to you by Independence House. My name is Sarah, and today I'm joined by Carrie. Today we're going to continue the conversation about domestic and sexual violence, why it happens, and its impact around our community and those within. Carrie, I have a few questions for you today, so I'd like to start off by asking you what some of the warning signs for domestic violence are.
Hi, Sarah. Yes, thanks for having me. So many people are familiar with the physical signs of abuse. However, the non-physical signs of abuse are usually more common. Signs of domestic violence include partners that constantly criticize their partners, belittling one's abilities, frequently starting arguments, controlling who your friends are, spending time with family, isolating you, or threatening to harm you, your family, or your pets. I have a resource here today. It's called the Power and Control Wheel. And as we've mentioned before, abuse is rooted in power and control. And this wheel really provides a great visual about the different types of power and control that abuser may exert over their partner. So I'm just going to go over a few of these examples. And one of them is using intimidation. So a person may use intimidation by making somebody afraid by simply the looks that they give, the gestures that they put out, smashing things, destroying property, or abusing pets. These are all methods of intimidation that are used. Also, using coercion and threats is another tactic. And this really comes down to making or carrying out threats, threatening to leave somebody, threatening to commit suicide is certainly a difficult one to navigate, and making threats sometimes of calling Department of Children and Families, calling welfare agencies. So they're all those all fall under the using coercion and threats. Another one is using economic abuse. What some abusers will do is they'll prevent their partner from getting a job, or they will control all of the finances in the house, which essentially prevents the person who is being abused from access to getting out and essentially being empowered to make changes in their own life. Another part of it is using male privilege. So this is where an abuser would treat their partner like a servant, or they would make all the decisions of the house, or essentially saying, I'm the king of the castle, if you will. And I say that in quotation marks. Another example of power and control that abusers use is the children as pawns in their game of power and control. And this can be done by making the person feel guilty, using the children to relay messages. So using the children as pawns, threatening to take the children away, and harassing the abuser if there has been separation during times of visitation. So those are all ways that children can be used with power and control. The next one is using emotional abuse. And this kind of goes back to some examples I gave earlier, where you're putting down your partner, you're making them feel bad about themselves, calling them names. This is a big one that you see a lot in the work that we do, is making the person think that they're crazy and that they're making up what they know that they're experiencing. The next one is using isolation, which I referenced. So controlling what the person does, controlling who they see, not allowing them to see family or friends, and sort of using jealousy to justify their actions. And the last one is minimizing, denying, or blaming. And again, I think we see a lot of this in our work, but this is one that we often see, or I often see with a lot of my clients. This is where an abuser will make light of their behavior, and they won't take any of the concerns of the person seriously. This is a big one, saying that the abuse didn't happen, or saying, if you didn't do this, I wouldn't have done that. And so they're shifting the responsibility of their behavior away. So those are some examples, I think tangible examples, some of the unseen examples of abuse that don't fall under the physical or necessarily violent forms of abuse, but abuse nonetheless.
Okay, wow, that's a lot of different tactics. So what should I do if I see some of these red flags in my own relationship?
So one of the things that we do advise our clients, or anybody in this situation, if you start to see warning signs in your relationship, we're always going to encourage you to start by sitting down and having a conversation with your partner. In an ideal situation, perhaps your partner didn't realize your behaviors were controlling. And maybe their response will, be more positive than you would hope for, and there might be room for change. However, if you do bring up what you're feeling and what you've been experiencing to your partner, and they resort back to some of these examples that I talked about in the power and control wheel, like perhaps minimizing what you're talking about or saying that it doesn't exist, you're making it up. This is where you might want to start to reach out for help. And this is where we would encourage somebody to call the Independence House. They can call our hotline at 800-439-6507. And our approach to counseling is not cookie cutter. Our approach to counseling is definitely based on the needs of the individual. So we would certainly be able to, find out what your needs are, do a sort of a safety assessment on you, and figure out, the best plan of action moving forward.
Great, that definitely sounds like a helpful resource, that 24/7-hour hotline. So that's great. So what if a friend of mine or a family member is experiencing some of these red flags in their relationship? How can I best support them?
That's also a really good question. So oftentimes when we see, a friend or a loved one, and we're starting to notice potentially some abusive behaviors, we would recommend in the same breath, the same advice that we would recommend to an individual is to have a conversation with that person. But there's two things to keep in mind when you're approaching and having a conversation with somebody, is that they may not be aware of it. They may not be ready to recognize what you're bringing to their attention, or simply they may be ashamed of it and they're simply not ready to address what is taking place. But nonetheless, reaching out as a friend and letting them know that you are an advocate in their corner is incredibly important to know, for them to know that they are supported, and also giving them our number, so that not only now do they know that they have an advocate in their corner, but they also have a resource, i.e. the Independence House hotline number, to call when they have gotten to a point where they're ready to take the next steps.
Great, thank you for answering those questions for me today, Carrie. So that wraps up our program for today. Again, we are staff at Independence House, Cape Cod's leading resource, counseling and advocacy center to address and prevent sexual and domestic violence. Join us again next week, please, as we discuss more sexual violence and how that affects our community or individuals who experience it. For ongoing information about Independence House, please visit our website at www.independencehouse.org. And if you are in need of help or any support, please reach out to our hotline, which is 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, at 1-800-439-6507. Thank you.